Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre, and Joe is not with me today because this is a short show, but it's packed full with really awesome sound. Joe is building for SL13B. SL13B, Second Life's 13th birthday. You gotta be there and you have to make content for it. It's awesome, but I'm getting ahead of myself. On today's show, Roh Nakayama, the director of marketing for Neutome, and Neutome is the maker of Project Alice, which we talked about in the previous few shows. Project Alice was exhibited at SVVR, and here's the interesting thing. So we designed this show around a really kind of a long interview with Roh, and we don't have it because Roh is a busy guy. So we have to postpone that interview, but we already put the blog post out and the images. So I figured rather, to put in Ginsu Yoon, formerly Linden, because I have audio from him, really great audio from SVVR, and I also have audio from Kent by our, not in-house, but if you will, the preeminent VR philosopher, at least in the podcast arena, with 400 shows. Oh, wait a minute. I hear the birds outside. Oh, do you hear those birds? Okay, I need to go outside. So that means that the birds are telling me to finish my ramble, my introductory ramble, and I'm going to do that. Here's my notes. You know how to support this show, and you know how important it is to support this show, and we really appreciate every support. So please contact Drax Files, the avatar, radio at draxfiles.com, how to get involved, how to sponsor this show, make sure that we get the expenses paid for, and that we can get the important people on this show. So, thank you for all the support from the corporate sponsors. Thanks to all the individual subscribers. Every Linden dollar counts. So let's jump right away to the interview with Roh Nakayama, director of marketing at Neutome. And what Neutome exhibited with Project Alice is basically a room where you can interact with real physical objects that are tracked in the room, and you have they work with Oculus DK2 and at SVVR, so it's kind of cobbled together with existing items, but they have a tracking system that they sell for various applications. And here's an ambulance. And the ambulance tells me, hurry up, Drax. We want to get to the sound. Anyway, so Project Alice, the unique thing is you interact with physical objects and you incorporate those physical objects that are tracked with the virtual objects that are created with your hand controllers. So the components... We'll link to an article from Road to VR and a bunch of other articles. You can see exactly how the components break down that Neutome uses to put that together. The room tracking, the tracking of the individual objects, and the computers that simulate the environment. The exciting thing is that you can be in there with other people and you interact with the virtual objects that you create. You can throw them to people, you can catch them, but you can also throw a basketball. You can catch it.
Hybrid,
there's a chair in there. This could be any object that you model. And you can sit on this chair. You can throw this chair, which you shouldn't. You can put virtual objects on that chair that have a physical interaction with the physical chair.
Mixed together with our IME system, which is a magnetometer, accelerometer, and gyroscope.
And so here's the audio with Roh. It's very short because we got interrupted,
the
and
combination of those two is our
we will
hybrid
follow this
system.
up with a long interview
and with
coming soon on this very
the
podcast.
HMDs that we have, and the computers and the whole platform.
This is from
basically allows
the Silicon
you
Virtual.
to have a multiplayer
This is from
experience.
Silicon Valley
in
Virtual
an
Reality
environment,
Conference
allows you to interact
2016.
with physical objects.
And you have physical objects. You have a chair. You have a
We have chairs.
basketball.
We have
a trash can.
trash can. We have a basketball. And what's interesting is a mixture of using virtual objects with real objects.
That's
so for
right.
example, you can fill the garbage can with virtual objects.
Yeah.
And, then
And
throw
actually,
them
I
out.
took this brick, the physical, let's just call it brick,
Yeah,
and I was stacking virtual cubes on top of the brick, and I could balance it and then toss it over. But I had a haptic experience by obviously holding the physical brick.
Yeah, and this is how we're getting on, because right now everybody's after haptics in virtual reality, and haptics is actually very, very difficult. Not only from the point of view of delivering the experience, but also in terms of what is exactly the haptic experience being delivered to the person. So this is actually very much more simple. Like we're actually giving you the real object.
Yeah.
By giving you a little mix of the both and allowing you to move in the environment.
That
then we
tricks
really
you
give
into sort of believing that the virtual objects are also real.
Exactly. You do need to have a mix of things, and I think this is where we're really delivering the technology, and I think this is where the creative we're looking for the creative minds that are going to create the experience afterwards. Because now it's a time we gave you a garbage can and we gave you some chairs and everything like that, but we can put trackers and IMUs on anything. The limits is up to your imagination, of the creative mind, the movie maker,
Yeah.
the VR experience maker now, to
And
create whatever they want.
Right, you mentioned earlier the stuff here. Your team built this, and some of the stuff was pre-existing. These are pre-existing Unity created virtual assets, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm a creative mind, but I cannot shell out $80,000 to buy your whole setup. Let's say.
Well, this is a B2B experience. This is not for consumers.
Right,
So
that's my question.
the person who's going to be the company who's going to be buying this is going to be buying. I mean, this is designed for theme parks, for educational purposes, for So let's take the most obvious. Someone who's doing an experience. They would be charging a certain amount of money for someone to come in here and have an experience. It could be a video game. It could be your adventure game or a movie or something like that. I imagine this personally. I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of movies. So recently we just had Batman versus Superman come out, and whether people like it or not, whether it was a good movie or a bad movie, I see this, for example, as an experience that you could come and experience part of the movie as a virtual reality, fully immersive experience, and have this great experience, and then also go see the movie.
So this was Roch Nakayama, and he's using as an example a big franchise here, Batman and Superman, and big Hollywood fair. We talked off Mike later on at the conference about the ability, of course, to create your own experiences and then track your own things. And just, again, my theme, bring everyone to the table. Maybe Linden Lab with Project Sansar will be a producer of experiences for Project Alice, and by extension, of course, the creators that are empowered to make their own things. Excuse my voice. But let's go right away to the audio I have from Kent Bai. Kent Bai, of course, the host of the Voices of VR podcast. He was on this show many times, and we talk exactly about that, about bringing people to the table, leveling the playing field. Common theme on this show. Kent was also at Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference. He actually held a talk about the 400 plus episodes that he made so far, interviewing people from makers, the makers and shakers of the new virtual reality realm, including people who have been there a lot longer than 2013. But here's Kent, and of course I asked him the big question right off the bat.
What is your assessment of the evolution of the revolution? Where are we in the year 2016, which has been defined by, I don't know, probably VCs, that it's the year of consumer VR?
Yeah, well, we've been waiting for a long time for the consumer launch of VR, and it's finally here.
Is it really?
Albeit it's kind of a fledgling start, to be honest, with a lot of the
with delays of the gear
actually landing into people's hands. I bought my Rift 6 minutes after it launched, and I figured I'd have it by now, but I still don't have my Rift. So I think there's a lot of frustration with people that want to have their Rifts, but they don't yet. But overall, I think that the momentum is there. Like, VR is not going to go away. I think we're past the tipping point of VR proving out its worth as a new communication medium that's going to solve a lot of real problems.
Running the risk of being a broken record, I really don't care actually, is you mentioned the advent of the devices that are pricey as the proof that VR is here to stay. Let me play devil's advocate or summarizing what I hear from the SL community, and they say it's a step backwards right now. I'm just talking about right now. It's a step backwards in the sense that it becomes it's a kind of an elitist crowd that has access monetarily to these devices in order to get in. Second Life was so instrumental in sort of democratizing this. Do you see anything on the horizon or right now that is following that same path? Because, obviously this stuff is amazing. Collisions with Lynette Walworth's thing with 360 video, I'm throwing everything in. It's also amazing. Not everybody has access to the Jaunt VR camera. Not everybody has access to a Vive. Where is the normal person who wants to create their stuff? Make the case that they are not left behind.
Well, I think right now, we're at the beginning of a new technology, so the prices are going to be high, just like cell phones were many thousands of dollars when they first came out. But, you get economies of scale once it is able to produce, and it really takes these early adopters that have the resources to be able to get the technology to be able to prove it out, because they're really talking about three different pegs here. We're talking about the hardware manufacturers, we're talking about content, and we're talking about the audience. You have to have all three of those pegs, and for the last 2 or 3 years we've had this iteration going back and forth between the hardware manufacturers and the content creators, and now we're just really legitimately trying to get the audience involved in that equation. And as that starts to evolve and grow, we have things like Google Cardboard, where they've put out like 5 million different units of cardboard, which is essentially just $5 to $10 worth of cardboard, and people can have their cell phones. And so in the long run, I think eventually we'll have three major categories of VR. We're going to have mobile VR, we're going to have desktop VR, we're going to have we're going to have the room scale VR. Those three different types of VR are the things that are really the ecosystem that's forming right now.
But in terms of content, and let's specifically talk about content creation. And we talked about this before, but we didn't record it. So where's the content going to come from? And I'm obviously enthusiastic that, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And again, people will say, well, what's the problem with Unity? You can actually get that, you can learn it, you can get a course. Why don't you do that? So it's already there. But my ideal world looks like a world where there's not such a distinction between audience and being relegated into the seat looking at things. I want a world where everybody's at the table in terms of creating stuff, because I feel everybody has an idea and everybody has a story, and it would be really cool if they were to tell it rather than sort of the elites grabbing the guy, telling their story, and then showcasing the story at Sundance, which is frankly just like a little elitist playground, I'm sorry to say. I just got into a kerfuffle earlier today about this.
Well, so I think that there's distribution right now is a big thing in terms of like the major players that are in control. They have their walled gardens, you know, and they're very curated. So people who have an idea, they may try to submit it and get it into the Oculus Home Store. Right. So there's a little bit of like these companies are playing a protective role of trying to put out the best of VR that's out there. They don't want to make easily available content experiences that are going to kind of pollute VR as like, oh, I'm going to try VR, and then it's a terrible experience that makes you sick, you know. So at this early phase, they're really taking that lockdown approach. You have things like Unity, Unreal Engine that are creating these binaries. You have things like the open web and A-frame, where people can do stuff on the web. That's going to be coming up more and more in the future as they come up with being able to get that performant enough. You have these more proprietary solutions that are these closed world, like either from Linden Lab, Project Sensar, or High Fidelity, or whatever different kind of private companies that are making it. I think High Fidelity, interestingly, is they're going to take more of an open web approach, so
That's
that
right.
it's more distributed, so you can have access of just like hosting your own website. Whereas, Project Sensar, it's going to be maybe a better experience at the beginning, but it's going to be proprietary. They're going to be in control. They're going to be controlling the economy. They're going to be controlling the everything, because they've done that. They've created these worlds. They know how to do governance. They know how to do commerce, but they're going to be in the middle taking a cut of everything. So I think in the short
But
term,
they're taking the cut and then it works. As the payoff for the cut is that it'll
works,
work.
It'll be better. It will actually
Hopefully.
be better, and we'll see. But in the long run, I think you're going to see some similar that in the early days of the internet and the World Wide Web. I should say the World Wide Web. We have like CompuServe and AOL, these kind of walled gardens that were better at the time. But the thing that eventually happened was that you had interconnecting websites, and then you have this effect of
AOL bought the Huffington Post, so Linden Lab can still buy it.
Well,
I know where you're
we'll
going
see.
with this.
We don't. We're just looking to the past. We can make some predictions about the future, but we actually don't really know what's
that's
going to
true.
happen.
It's
So,
true.
I think that openness in the end is going to win. That's my take. Is that I've done different interviews at VR hackathons, and I talk to people who work in the military, and they're like, they're not using Unity. They're using like this open standard web format because Web 3D because. If they're thinking about like, is this going to work in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Like if you create an experience in any of the like Unity, Unreal, there's no guarantee that in 5, 10, 15 years you're going to be able to even still have access to that
Absolutely.
content.
I mean, that's a nightmare even for audio people with playback devices. Mini disc, I still have 20 hours of stuff on mini disc, and I had to buy 5 little mini disc recorders on eBay to make sure that the device is not broken.
Yeah, but they have to do that for innovation. In order to have the most cutting edge things, you have to break backwards compatibility. So you have these binaries like Unreal and Unity that are breaking backwards compatibility so they can be the best right now. But there's other people that have other approaches in the long term that may not be as good of an experience, but in the long run, it'll have more longer lasting. So I think most people aren't really thinking about that. They want to have the best experience right now, but they're willing to give up the control that offers because they're not able to control the full stack of the technology because these different platforms that are out there, you can actually use them and save yourself a lot of headaches and trouble because it just works, and that's what I think a lot of people are looking for.
It's going to be interesting. And then final question, as we talked at Sundance about your take was on, High Fidelity is going that route versus Linden Lab goes the round of a very kind of a control system where then you also get the guarantee that it works just like a good car, let's say, versus a bicycle that you put together yourself. But you already said that you think that the open approach will win out in the end.
Well, I think in the short term, though, there's going to be a certain amount of social engagement. You go into a bar and there's nobody there. You're not going to want to hang out in that bar. And so, in some ways, whoever can be that early mover in terms of creating compelling social experiences, but also lower the friction between being able to take what's in your mind and create it in the world.
So basically, what you're saying, and I think this is often forgotten, that when you're in the field of High Fidelity or Linden Lab or Altspace VR, you could create the coolest thing, the coolest jazz club, but if there's nobody there, it will not be successful. So these companies are extremely dependent on, and Hi-Fi Hackathon is happening this weekend, to have people not only to create content, but also just to be there.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing. Attention is going to be the thing that really drives this engagement. And you brought up a thing that I didn't really get a chance to address, and I just want to kind of maybe use that as my perhaps final thought.
Yes, please.
And that's that
digital media is cheap.
Kind of the skepticism around like what VR is actually going to give. And I would argue that this moment in time in history is so similar in a lot of ways to 1455 when the first Gutenberg Bible was printed. You're basically taking a new communication medium of the printed book to be able to capture information and knowledge and put it out into the world in a way that goes beyond what was possible before. And so that kind of helped spur the Renaissance in that time. And so with virtual reality, the thing that's different about it, the technology and why it's important, is that you're able to actually put experiences into our body that goes directly into our perceptual system. It can trick our subconscious mind into believing that we're in another world. And having that sense of embodied presence is fundamentally different than anything else that we've had or seen so far, and that is a brand new communication medium that we're in the midst of as it's kind of emerging and being birthed right now. So in the long term of looking at all the history of humanity, I can wait another 2 months for my Oculus Rift, but it's just incredible that we're going to have this capability, and I think personally that it's going to spur a new renaissance of creativity, imagination, and perhaps make us more connected. It's got all sorts of ways that it can help make humanity better, but also it can, has downsides as well. But overall, on the whole, that there's something that this virtual reality technology gives us that transcends and goes beyond what anything else we've seen before.
If it enables people, again, broken record syndrome, if it brings people to the table, levels the playing field in terms of, Philip Rosedale said that in a 2007 interview of the CNN, I found that online, it's hilarious, the Future Summit on CNN, Nick Yee, Philip Rosedale, and Philip says, we were told as kids that there are people who create and other people who are just not good at that stuff. And I'm riffing on his ramble by rambling. Relegated to just sitting there and enjoy what the other people do. And he wanted to really break up this paradigm with Second Life, and I think he was very successful with it, and that's exciting about what's happening right now.
I wonder if we are going to be able to break out of this kind of the there's an 80-20 rule where 20% of the people end up producing, and there ends up being about 80% of the consumers, and so. But
I think I know what you're saying, and I have this conversation all the time. I think that's a little artificial. I think, and I don't know what the research is on that. But let me give you a quick example. My grandmother, they had a farm. They were farmers in East Germany, it's now Poland. They all played instruments. There was no entertainment. So they had their own entertainment, right? They were not trained musicians, and it's happening in this country too, it's still, But the point is, out of necessity, they had to make their own entertainment. So they had a dance Friday. Okay, we have no musicians, so I'm going to learn how to play violin, and then we're going to just play something, and that's how kind of culture develops. And I really hope that with this new medium, it happens kind of the similar way, and it kind of breaks that apart. Because the only people who are served by that distinction, and again, I don't know academically if it's artificial or not. There's probably research on that. The people who are served by that are frankly people who sell you stuff to consume.
Well, I think there's a couple of echoes of this larger point of kind of making sure that everyone has access and has equal opportunity. And right now we do have a digital divide even with the internet. And this is something where having equal access to just having online connectivity is something.
The connectivity, exactly. Everybody has a phone, but you've got to shell out $80 for a decent connection, Comcast. Yeah.
So it's something that is going to replicate itself. It's something that already exists in our world and in humanity. It's going to have this same, if somebody has a Vive, are they going to have more power and control and agency than if somebody just has a Gear VR mobile? And so something that was explored within Ready Player One in terms of, having the really best haptic suits and what that is going to give you versus other people. So I think, I don't see any other way out than that there is going to be that split. We're not going to have like this VR socialism where everybody's equal and everyone has access to everything. It's just, that's the way our kind of mechanisms of capitalism are working at this point, that the way that innovation is being driven is by these early adopters, and people who do have access to power and privilege are going to get more access to virtual experiences than other people at first.
But through the fact that in high fidelity and probably Project Sansar, you can create, you could theoretically be on the creative side by just running it on a regular, admittedly higher powered machine. You could create stuff that you could even see yourself if you didn't have the money for a headset, let's say, but you could at least be at the table kind of creating stuff. So that is kind of cool.
If I make a prediction that whoever is able to make the best world building tools and build the best, in combination with the best network of people and social experiences, those are going to be the winners. And I think personally in the long run that openness is going to be that winner. Maybe in the short run actually what you have to do in order to have the business models to even support that. But
you're younger than me. You backpack, and I used to backpack, and now I just want to go into the hotel, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I want the water to be warm.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. This is just one of my completely nonsensical analogies. No.
What are you trying to say, though? I don't understand.
No, I'm trying to say that let's assume Project Sansar is the world-building tool. When I think of, I want to do a historic experience. Do I go to Project Sansar or do I go to High Fidelity? What are the selling points? Project Sansar, the selling point is going to be up 100%. It's smooth. We take care of all this shit. If the stuff explodes, it's still going to be there. And High Fidelity, well, you got to you're on your own, and everything is possible. And we got a forum, and you can ask people, and you can get stuff from GitHub. I just compared that to like, hey, I'm going to go to a different city and call someone if I can crash on their floor, and then I don't know. I don't want to be 20 again. I want to have my own room.
All right, so that was Kent, and I apologize to subject you, dear listener, to my rants. Maybe I'm the elitist here, the elitist who wants to stay in a hotel and is too good to sort of high class to crash with others at my advanced age. No, point here is, of course, bringing people to the table. It's as simple as that. But now let's play Ginsu Yoon's audio, because finally I got to talk to him, and he's a real, I think, a big thinker in this space. Having been at Linden Lab from very early on, he works, as he mentioned, in a different field now, not in the field of virtual reality. But he, I think, is instrumental, still is, in thinking about the implications of what virtual worlds can do. Ginsu started at Linden Lab as in international marketing, and he was also the general counsel. And he was at one point the interim CFO, sort of a lot of musical chairs. And he was part of the enterprise team, Second Life. Residents who are listening will remember that. That was the sort of turnkey solution for enterprise Second Life on a server that is private, and all that was not very successful. I always thought this was a great idea. Come at me in the comments if in 2020 hindsight or Monday morning quarterback you tell me that this was a stupid idea. You don't know how they pan out, but anyway. I wanted to know from Ginsu, what I kind of ask everyone, especially at these conferences where everybody's so gung-ho about virtual reality, billions of people will come in. And the question really is, do people really want to create, or do they just want to consume? I mean, is my idealism or the idealism of other people, is that somehow founded in reality, or is it delusional? And here's Ginsu answering that question.
The desire to create, period, is part of a natural human instinct that anyone could participate in. And that translating that into a digital environment, of course, is going to happen. That isn't a question. And people who are skeptical about that basically don't understand technology and don't understand human impulse. There's just this amazing inability to project, which is fascinating, because everyone sees all these times in the past where people have been unable to project, and we laugh at them. We laugh at all these things where people said, "Oh, the internet is never going to take off." Oh, nobody wants a home computer. Nobody needs an automobile. Who needs a telephone, right? I mean, but it's so obvious in retrospect, and it's always been obvious if you can just project what's going on. People point to the failures, people point to how long it takes, but that is something that was always apparent to me. Of course, we were enthusiastic about it in the peak hype days at Second Life, but it was apparent to me, and apparent to me because it was apparent to Philip. Philip always talked about this, that we are technology constrained. We have this idea that we're building this interactive virtual world that's highly creative, that relies on user-created content. Is it a great idea? Yes. Does everybody want to do it? Yes. Who's going to do it? The people who are going to do it are the people who are going to bridge the technology gap with their imagination and desire. When you talk about a 3D world where the way that you get into it is through a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, these incredibly clunky tools compared to our actual physical abilities, it's a huge barrier. It's a huge gap. And the people who are going to bridge that gap have got this tremendous imagination and or desire. You have to bridge that gap because you want that so badly. All that's going to happen as technology progresses is that the gap is going to get smaller, or the barrier is going to get lower. How low does the barrier actually have to be? That's the only question, right? I don't think it has to get as low as virtually frictionless, but let me tell you what a frictionless barrier to entry looks like. It means that the way that you see in the world is embedded into your contact lenses. The way that you interact is through input devices that read your body, and you are barely conscious that you have these inputs devices on. Maybe it's embedded in your clothing.
We just read Rainbow's End again.
Sure.
The best book ever.
Yeah, all these science fiction novels captured it, right? The oral capabilities are going to be implanted into your ear. The capability to move is going to be through brainwave signals. These things sound like science fiction, but they're clearly not. I mean, the difference today is everyone can see that every technology that I just talked about is in development. Everything that I just talked about is going to be existing in the market within 5 to 10 years. How low does that barrier have to get? I don't think it has to get as low as I just described. At some point, as it's going down to that low barrier, more and more people are going to get it. At first, maybe it'll cost $1 million per setup. And then people will say, oh, it's only for rich people, this, that. It's ridiculous. This is how technology works. You develop these things.
I did say that yesterday. I did say who has the... But I said it in the context of Second Life, which is still enabling so many people. I just did a story about nonprofit community, been there for over 10 years. They're thriving, they're doing stuff. And now, okay, well, you got to shell out $800 for an HTC Vive. Yeah. I see your point, a very good point. Might be very temporary, might go down, probably will.
Yeah.
Very fast.
I mean, we've all seen this picture of a 5 megabyte drive in 1956.
They're hauling it
IBM
into the
is
truck.
shifting this thing. Yeah, it is the size of a minivan, right? And how much did that thing cost? Probably something on the order of like $10 million, right? And at the time, who needs that, right? When is that ever going to be useful to actual people? Like, obviously now, it's clear to everybody, but it was clear back then to the guys developing the technology, and I think it's the same with virtual worlds. The non-believers in this space, it's very frustrating. I don't work in the space anymore, but I still have a huge belief that the technology trend is obvious, and the non-believers, they talk about things that are irrelevant. It's amazing how ignorant that they sound. Second Life doesn't have a different definition of failure. It has a different definition of success. Success, when you're trying to be, or when you're being characterized as among the most ambitious companies in Silicon Valley, success means everybody uses it. It's changed life in this mass way. How many successes have there been over the last 10 years? I mean, you can count them on like maybe two hands, right? That's success,
when you define it like that.
Right? And everything short of that is a failure, right?
That is incredibly sad to me.
Look, here's what I'll say. It's not unreasonable to have some portion of the population think that way. You want that, right? And you do also, you should, specifically with virtual worlds, also recognize, again, the maximum commercial success possible can only be built on the people who will bridge the technology gap with their imagination. Okay, and again, that audience was small back when I was at Second Life. It's still small today. And that audience is only going to grow as the technology improves. What is frustrating to those of us who have been aware of the vision and deeply living in the existing vision for so long is that the vision gets clearer and clearer, and it's so obvious that if you'll bridge the gap yourself with your imagination, you can kind of live in the future right now. But look, you just have to understand that's not how the mass of humanity works. You bridge that gap with technology, and it's a beautiful thing that it's happening now with all these other companies. Great,
Silicon Valley needs to be more precise in defining success. It's completely legitimate to say this is an economic success, this is an economic failure, given these parameters. But sustainability, even if it's for a small niche group, could also be defined as a success. I'm just saying.
Who cares what anybody's definition of success is?
You're right.
Right?
I'm just a curmudgeon sitting at home looking at Mashable writing, oh, I hope Facebook VR is not going to be another Second Life because Second Life has absolutely zero impact in the social realm.
Right.
And I'm reading this and I go like, this is an insult to a lot of my friends whose individual lives have been literally transformed.
Yeah, they'll write. Trust me, they will write about how Oculus VR was a failure too, because this clunky thing that you wear on your face, again, that's not a low enough barrier to entry. It's got to get to a place where, if not embedded,
once we have contact lenses, go like, can you remember that failure, that Oculus failure, those huge things?
Exactly. They're going to talk about that like they talk about the Palm Trio or the Apple Newton. Were those products failures? Yeah, they sure were. Did they introduce really a new method of computing that ultimately became successful? Yeah, they did. And in Palm's case, they couldn't capitalize at all. In Apple's case, 20 years later, they happen to be in a position to re-enter the market in handheld personal computing and win. Right? So the company that actually wins is not necessarily, and actually is fairly rarely, the company that makes that mass success. Mm-hmm. But the concept was right, and to have been involved in the Trio, to have been involved in the Apple Newton, the pen computing products that existed 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Go back and track who was involved in those things and see what they did in the rest of their careers in technology. These guys remained some great leaders. These guys went to different companies and continued to live in the future, right? And the people who talk about success and failure and it matters to them and they feel bad about other people's judgment about them, I mean, those guys are they're just always on the sidelines. That's fine. Let them sit there and make their judgments.
Very well said, Ginsu. Very well said. So this is the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you didn't miss Joe too much. Brett Heftegaup from High Fidelity on Twitter was complaining, quote unquote. He wasn't complaining, but he pointed out that the advertisements for 1920s Berlin in our podcast are in no way subtle. So I'll tell Joe to tone it down when she comes back next time, because what too much is too much. Anyway, a couple of other things before we go on the blog. I linked to a video that is a little bit disturbing from a woman who is complaining about sex in Second Life, and she called Linden Lab and she called the FBI. And she's disturbed that nobody's doing anything about it. I commented on this video in sort of a lighthearted fashion. It is there is some mental health issues going on here with this woman, unfortunately, and I didn't want to make fun of her. There's a lot of people kind of pounding on her. She's obviously a little disturbed. She complained. Apparently, she's really also going after folks who, in her mind, dismiss the biggest issue there is in digital worlds, which is sex in Second Life, as if there is no issue with easy access to age-inappropriate sites on the internet. So when you're a parent, you're always concerned about this stuff. I don't want to laugh at people who are disturbed, but there's some humor to it. I had to link to it. I'm sorry. I'm a bad guy. And not to forget two more things. The Google I/O conference happened, and they introduced Daydream VR, which is a platform and maybe a device, and maybe everything together, the complete solution to VR. And so they're not sitting on the sidelines. They want to be the number one destination for VR. So we'll link to a couple of videos. What else? High Fidelity, a big topic last week's show, announced that they figured out how to run the DK2 on a Mac. I mean, High Fidelity with a DK2. We linked to a blog post, also from, incidentally, Brett Heftegaup, mentioned 3 times this show already, on the High Fidelity website. So that's that, and also the hashtag Because of Second Life is still going on, and people are posting some really cool stuff. People are posting baby pictures and people that they met in Second Life and successful relationships and all this kind of stuff. It's really heartwarming. Yeah, but that's it for the show. I'm working hard on the next Drax Files episode, video episode. That's going to be about fun. It's going to be about consumerism, and it's going to be totally embracing that. Although anyone listening to this program knows that I'm not really a big fan of unfettered capitalism. But this episode is going to be maybe educating me and showing me the bright side of shopping for shoes. Thanks for listening. Joe will be back next week. And don't forget SL13B. Links are on the blog. Apply now and start building. Thanks. And have a great weekend.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Extraordinary Fine Magical Goods, Ionic, Maven Homes, Giza Creations, Botanical, Strawberry Sing, Humanoid Animations, Abranimations, Eros Avatars, Caravel Design, The Cube Republic, the Avazines Publication Family, What Next, Duchy Furniture, Landscapes Unlimited, Bay Cities for Kids, Dwarfins, Fallen Gods Incorporated, Feroce SL, and Death Row Designs. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar, DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.